Watch this. Most amateurs prepare for the wrong spin level on every push, and that one mistake is why your returns hit the net. Hi everyone, I'm Coach Han. Today we're tackling one of the biggest problems in the amateur game, how to read and respond to underspin serves. I use a simple grading system, level 1, level 2, and level 3 spin. Understanding these levels will transform your receive game. Most of you aren't misjudging the spin direction, you know it's backspin. The problem is you can't tell how much backspin. Let's start with the push, since that's the most common receive for amateur players. Here's my first question for you. When you step up to push against an underspin serve, do you prepare for level 1 spin, level 2, or level 3? Think about it. Why can't most amateurs produce level 3 spin on their serves? Because their finger, wrist, and forearm acceleration just isn't enough. So the answer is, you should default to preparing for level 2 spin, what I call a normal underspin ball. Nowadays, most amateur players, beyond the absolute beginner stage, have learned to use their fingers and wrist, and to push downward when they serve. That produces level 2 spin. That's your baseline assumption. Most amateur serves sit at level 2 because reaching level 3 requires real mastery of the wrist snap at the bottom of the stroke. So start by treating most incoming balls as level 2. For a standard push against level 2 spin, think about your racket angle. Here's vertical, here's flat, I split the difference right in the middle. Then I push forward and down. Watch, forward and down lets me push with control and still send the ball deep. It stays low. I keep my arm moving at a steady pace and add a little finger and wrist action. That's your level 2 push. That handles a normal underspin ball. But what if your opponent is tricking you? You push and the ball pops up half high and they attack you 2 or 3 times in a row. They use deceptive motion to make you misread the spin. Here's how you adjust. Tilt your racket face from its neutral position to slightly more vertical. The adjustment must be tiny, think of it as half a notch, maybe 1 notch on a clock face. A micro adjustment, not a big change. Then, and this is the real key, whenever your push keeps floating up, your stroke direction must be more downward than forward. Downward greater than forward. That brings the ball back down. Watch this serve, it's slow, with very little finger and wrist action. Against this type of ball, you must emphasize the downward component over the forward component. Push it long. See how the downward motion outweighs the forward motion? The ball stays low and lands deep. Follow this method every time your push pops up half high and you'll keep the ball on the table. It won't sit up high enough for your opponent to smash. They'll have to loop it instead. So the recipe is, tilt the racket face slightly more vertical and make the downward angle of your stroke bigger than the forward angle. That brings the ball down. Watch, if I stand the racket up but still push too far forward, the ball floats half high again. Direction matters more than angle alone. Too much forward means you eat the spin. Now, the third scenario. You push with your level 2 setup and the ball drops into the net. That net ball is telling you the spin is heavier than you assumed. It's actually level 3. When that happens, don't fight reality. Trust what the ball is showing you. Accept the evidence and adjust. Next, trust the objective feedback. When you put 2 or 3 pushes into the net, the serve is heavier than you thought. Your opponent's wrist power is real. So here's the adjustment. From your baseline racket angle, open the face slightly flatter and let the forward component of your stroke outweigh the downward component. Watch just a little flatter, a little more forward motion than downward. See how the ball clears the net now? It doesn't dive into the tape anymore. The key is a small adjustment from your baseline, not a wholesale change. Don't keep tinkering back and forth, or you'll lose your reference point entirely. If I add even a little more downward angle, the ball immediately catches the net. This is exactly why amateurs keep getting caught by deep, heavy side underspin serves. You swing down and the racket just stops. The ball dies in the net. Against that heavy deep serve, open the racket face a touch flatter and extend your forearm out toward the baseline. Push through the ball. Send it deep to the opponent's end line. Send it all the way to the baseline, but only when the serve is genuinely heavy. If it's actually light spin and you push forward like that, the ball sails long. So here are the three scenarios together. First, read the approximate spin level from the server's action. Second, match your racket angle and stroke direction to that level. Third, adjust immediately based on the result. Table tennis isn't one push fits all. Even backspin comes in different levels, and each level demands a different response. Now exactly that's the idea. Now let's talk about looping against underspin. Think of your racket angle like a clock face. 12 o'clock means the racket is fully closed, pressed flat on top. A normal loop against backspin sits around 2 o'clock slightly open. When you face a half-long ball that might be no spin, close the face down to about 1 o'clock, maybe 1:30. Use the racket angle to match the spin level. That's method 1. Method 2. If you genuinely can't tell whether it's spin or no spin, don't just close the face and drive forward, you'll dump it into the net. You still need to lift the ball into an arc first, then close over it. Watch me demonstrate. See, the ball goes over. Even when I add power, it still lands on the table. The key is I lift into an arc first, then close over the top to bring it back down. This works whether the serve has backspin or is no spin. The same technique handles both. Now what about really heavy backspin? If it's genuinely loaded, sometimes the smart play is just to push it back, return the spin to your opponent. But if you're determined to loop it, here's the concept. Use the combined force. What does that mean? When someone serves with extreme backspin, watch what the ball does after the bounce, it dives downward. The ball's own momentum is pulling it down. So your body has to go down with it. You can't stay high and try to muscle the ball up from behind. You need to drop down and work with the ball's downward energy, not fight against it. But if you stand close to the table and drop down, you jam yourself, there's no room. So step back and take the ball at its descending point. Once the ball enters the falling phase, the spin has already weakened, sometimes nearly cut in half. Watch, if I push this heavy serve at the descending point, it's manageable. If I loop it there, same thing, much easier. Step back, wait for the drop, and the spin does half the work for you. When a ball is so heavy that your own strength can't lift it, stop fighting it alone, borrow the ball's energy. With heavy backspin, that energy pulls downward, not backward. So let the ball fall, drop with it, and sweep upward from underneath to create your arc. Don't try to generate the arc from behind the ball, generate it from below.